YouTube. My name is Scott Brackett. I make music and I make videos with music, and then I also make videos about how I make videos of music, and then use synthesizers. A lot of them are Yamaha synthesizers. So they have asked me to talk a little bit more about how I do sound design specifically with things like this Rephase DX and the MOXF and the QL100 and the PSS 480, among others. So let's get started.
So when I'm doing sound design, I tend to dedicate my day to synth programming and sampling and just let it be its own creative act. I find if I treat it like a chore that's in the way of making music, I end up making worse patches because I'm grouchy and being less organized because I'm in a hurry. One of the axioms that I try to keep in mind when I'm doing anything creative is follow the fun. Doesn't matter what your timeline is, if you're not having fun, chances are that's going to translate into the final product. So the difficulty when you're paying for studio hours is doing that on the clock. So I find doing sound design as a sort of creative thing in stretches of time where I have more room to sort of be relaxed is better. And then when I go into those high pressure situations, I've got all my sounds ready and I can just do the thing that feels right in the moment. I don't have to worry about all that sort of more nuts and bolts stuff. And when I'm doing these sort of sound design sessions, if I ever find myself thinking, this sucks, I don't want to do this anymore, I try to find a way that I can maybe shift directions and still be productive, and then kind of bookmark that moment so that later on I can think about what went so poorly and hopefully change my workflow to be more fun and still yield good results. I've talked about it before, but while I love computers and I recognize that they're an essential part of modern music making and life, really, I find I'm not inspired to make music when I'm sitting in front of them most of the time. Even with a nice MIDI controller or something like a Ableton Push, I'm fine until my DAW crashes or some plugin fails to load, or something starts going on with my audio interface. I find myself thinking, this sucks, I don't want to do this anymore. So that's why I largely write using hardware sequencers. In order to do that and still get the awesome sonic textures that come with having a bunch of plugins and homemade sample libraries, I need to get them onto my hardware sampler. In my case, that's the MOXF. I prefer the MOXF over the Motif because I'm lazy, and the MOXF only weighs 14 pounds. And with the upgraded flash memory, it can play back custom and third-party samples in the AWM2 synth engine. It's not just like triggering one-shots, but it also can't sample on its own. So another thing, sort of tagline I live by is designing means deciding. So at a certain point, you just make decisions and you have to move forward, and sometimes that means sacrificing other things. So I respect that the production team at Yamaha decided to lose the sampling feature and instead focus on making an affordable keyboard that still has a lot of sonic power. And fortunately, there's a guy named John Malis who filled that need perfectly with a piece of software he wrote. He made this waveform editor that lets you take samples from your computer and package them up in a format that Motif and MOXF and Montage can read. His software isn't free, but it's worth every penny. It's super easy to use, has a built-in playback engine so you can audition your sounds as you work, and then throw your finished packages onto a USB stick, and then you can just load them on your Motif or MOXF. And unlike some of the other workstations and samplers I've worked with over the years, the awesome thing about the flash memory that Yamaha uses is that even if you fill up the entire memory board, it'll still boot up in 7 seconds. That's huge. For me, I'm very busy and I may only have 20 or 30 minutes at a time to devote to music throughout the week. I don't want to spend 15 of those minutes booting up, opening my DAW, troubleshooting why my audio interface isn't showing up, and and then start creating. By the time I get to that, I'm maybe grouchy already. But I tend to do all my sampling when I have more time, like a weekend or something. Then if I package everything up and throw it on the MOXF, when I have sort of a bigger stretch of time, then I can spend the 10 minutes while I'm drinking my morning coffee and maybe create a patch that I use for years. There are definitely moments during the file wrangling that leads up to a finished pack that are tedious, but I find when I'm sick of it, I can just save my work, load up whatever I made on the MOXF, and see what it's like on the machine itself. This has led to some very happy accidents, actually. And when I just decided to, stretch one sample across the entire keybed instead of putting a one per octave or one sample per note, sometimes I really like the way that sounds. Or I accidentally looped several samples that I meant to have set as one shot, and the result was kind of hilarious, and I ended up using it and really liking it. Leaving room for happy accidents is always a good idea, but it's hard to get into that mindset when you're rushed. And in fact, when you're in a hurry, you're more likely to make room for unhappy accidents, like forgetting to save your work or accidentally reassigning all the samples you just spent 30 minutes working on to the wrong spots. So when I hit that, I'm not having fun anymore spot, it's usually better to just save my work, walk over to a hardware sequencer, and start writing music, because it turns out that's what I'd rather be doing. All those samples will still be there in the next session, and I'll be more efficient if I'm fresh. So I currently own two types of synthesizers that Yamaha makes. One is sample-based, which is the MOXF and things like the QY100 or the DD7. And then there's frequency modulation or FM synthesis like the DX and the PSS 480. And then there's virtual analog like the Reface CS, which I don't have with me today. I lent it to a friend, so I'm not going to show it today, but I'll talk about it. Personally, if I think too hard about the physics of sound and how speakers work and how oscillators work, I feel like I understand it less and less, so I'm probably not the person to explain that stuff to you. If you don't know, Google it, and hopefully you can find someone smarter than me to explain it to you. But while I can't explain how it works, I can tell you how I use them and what I like about their options and features in great detail at every chance I get, and for as long as my listener will indulge me. So thank you for giving me an outlet here. It spares my friends, family, and my partner from having to hear me talk about this stuff. She thanks you, they thank you, and I thank you. So let's get started. The MOXF is an 8-oscillator synth engine that allows you to create sounds using either a single waveform per oscillator, or you can create waveform banks, which is like a series of waveforms that can be associated with one oscillator. Or I guess they call them elements would be the better word. So you've got 8 of these guys. That's a weird way to do that. Let's call each of these elements, right? And you can assign a sample or a set of samples to them. So I could say, with this one, this is going to be organ, an old organ I found at the thrift store. I'm going to sample each key on an old organ, and then maybe for this one, I'm going to sample the PSS 480 and do every key for a particular preset. And then maybe I do a different preset on this one. And maybe on this fourth one, I actually sample my dog panting or, eating or something. And then I spread that entire sample across the whole keyboard, and maybe make it only active when you hit the keys really hard. So, there we've only got 4 elements, and there's already a ton going on, and we can assign them to do like random panning and change different things. And not to mention, there's a master LFO that you can route to any one of the elements for different things. and they're using the modulation box, so you can change different aspects of those, and it has a lot of cool random features and stuff. It's an awesome random waveform, but you can also draw your own waveform, which is pretty cool. And then there's also LFOs per element, so you can have this one triangle wave modulating pitch on its dedicated LFO, this one doing a really quick square wave wobble on its pitch, and then you can have the master LFO set to random or something, modulating the speed of each of the LFOs, plus maybe routing to the pitch of all of them. And you can also change the phase, so this, the point at which it would give it this oscillator a high value could be, could start here and then be low here. Or here's a better way to say it. So this one will start at this point in the wave, and this one starts here. So it kind of does this little cascading effect of maybe pitch or some other element. Terrible explanation, but I'm going to move on. So we've only used 4 of those, and then there's the modulation stuff. And each of these also have dedicated envelopes for filter, amplitude, and pitch. So it gets pretty crazy pretty fast. I love the Yamaha stuff. So for FM synthesis, it's at its core, it's just a thing that makes a sound called a carrier, and then another thing that uses a similar waveform to actually modify that waveform. So you go from something that's like this to something that goes like that kind of thing. I said I wasn't going to get into this, but basically it's really cool because if you get a couple more of those, that PSS 480 is a 2 operator synth, and you can get a lot done with just 2. But if you add 2 more, you can start to do crazier stuff, like modulate the waveform that's modulating that one, and maybe this one's a square wave, and it's also modulating the carrier wave. So you can set up these different sort of they call them algorithms, but basically just different routings for the different operators. And then each one of these also has its own attack envelope, so you can have a quick attack and that kind of thing, or you can have this one rise and drop off really steeply in amplitude, so it doesn't actually modify this waveform at first unless you hold the note out, and then it slowly builds up. And then all of these also have a master LFO, which you can route to, I believe it's amplitude and pitch for each of them. And so between that, you can get a lot done sound design wise. And I personally find that 4 operators is a really sweet spot for sort of sculpting a sound quickly. I look forward to the time when I own an 8 operator FM synth, but I don't yet. So for now, I'm going to tell myself that I love 4 operators. I also I do have a weak spot for like the FB01, which is way harder to program than the DX, but similarly just has, I don't know, this something about it, the way that engine is set up really works for me and really does the things that I want out of a sound engine. So, and then of course with the DX, like it's the form factor of a key, like a toy keyboard, but with much higher quality components and much cleaner output signal. So, and of course more modern programming features. Then of course last I have the CS, which I don't have with me, but it's white and it's got keys on it. Just trust me. And it says CS on there somewhere, which is cool. But this one is a virtual analog synth, and it's cool because it's got all the knobs and all the faders, I should say, on it. And what you see is what you get. So if you see the envelope set up a particular way, or you see, the LFO options set to a certain way, what you see is what you get. And that's really fun for sort of exploratory, just kind of crawling all over the faders while you're playing. And it's a virtual analog synth, so it's got some of the qualities of an analog synth programmed into it. They kind of model some of the quirks of a analog synth, but it's as dependable as a digital synth. And it also doesn't go out of tune in the same way, which some people say that's part of the charm, but I say that's true within limits. Ultimately, I like a little bit of randomness, but not so much that I can't use the instrument with other instruments. So, which one is better? I would say the only reason to ever choose between two synthesizers is because you cannot afford both of them. Don't pick sides. If there is a discussion about which is better, analog or digital, don't pick sides. There's no need. I love sample-based synthesis. I love FM synthesis. I love virtual analog. I love analog. And, everything in between. There's going to be all these hybrid things out there, too. And most of the synthesizers we use today are sort of digitally controlled analog. They're digitally controlled at some level. So we're really splitting hairs in some ways. I feel like every keyboard out there, every sound source, every sample, every instrument is perfect for some mix somewhere. It is the thing that will make the track the track, and you just need to find it. And I don't blame a puzzle piece for not fitting in the hole that I have in front of me. So try to change your way of thinking if you find yourself in one of these kinds of arguments, because really the best keyboard is the one you have.
So, thanks for watching. I guess I'll say thanks to Yamaha for continuing to kind of engage with me and give me projects, and for sort of being cool to the synth community. And then I'll also say thank you to the synth community and yourself for being so supportive to each other and for caring about what I do in whatever capacity that you care. And I hope I covered something that you liked or learned something from or made you want to ask additional questions about. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below, and like and subscribe if you liked and want to subscribe. Thanks for stopping by. Take us out here.